Okay, this section is on the female reproductive system, and I've added a little bit on the when the two get together parts. Not the stuff you already knew, but at the end, anyway. Okay, the female reproductive anatomy, the ovary, your female gonads, and they produce gametes, also known as ova or oocytes. And they produce the female sex hormones, estrogen, and progesterone. The accessory ducts include the uterine tubes, also known as fallopian tubes, also known as just tubes, the uterus, and the vagina. The internal genitalia is your ovaries, uterine tubes, uterus, and vagina. And the external genitalia is your external sex organs. It doesn't really say much, but we'll look at that in a minute. Okay, now this is a side view of the uterus. As you can see, you have the roundness here, and this is the cervix. This is the inside. This is all myometrium. It's all muscular. Cervix, it would be closed at the state. And the vagina, this is the greater vestibular gland, which is for lubrication. This is the urinary bladder, urethra coming here, clitoris up here, and then the rectum and anus here. And just from this point of view, you see the proximity of the vagina to the urethra. And any germs that are introduced here can end up going here. Same thing for the anus, which is awfully close to here. It's where a lot of urinary tract infections come from. Okay, and we'll look at more details on the anatomy later. Okay, it's held in place by the ovarian ligament, which it holds the ovary to the uterus. Suspensory ligament holds the ovary to the lateral wall. Mesovarium suspends the ovary, and then we have a broad ligament, which holds up pretty much everything else. We got a picture coming up. Here's our broad ligament, all this stuff in here. And you got one on both sides, of course. This is a round ligament that helps hold the uterus up. This is going to be your fallopian tube, your ovary, and I think we have more details on these later. This is a fimbriae of the uterine tube. Now, if we don't have another picture, I'll go ahead and go now. Of course, the sperm comes in through here, goes up through here. The egg is actually released on the outside of the ovary and picked up by these fimbria and goes into your tube. And fertilization takes place somewhere in here. Now, ectopic pregnancies tend to occur because you have scarring in here, like I mentioned in the STD section. It's small enough for sperm, big enough for sperm to get through, but not big enough for fertilized egg to get through. And then the egg should come in. The fertilized egg should implant into the wall here of the uterus. Okay, the ovaries, blood supply, ovarian arteries, and the uterine artery. And the ovaries are surrounded by a fibrous tunica albuginea and two poorly defined areas. The cortex is the outside, is where the follicles are formed. The medulla is for blood vessels and nerves. Okay, and this is probably very different than it's certainly different than what I had pictured an ovary would be like before I knew anything about it. I thought that it would be a hollow organ that the egg was released into the inside and then connected to the tube here, but it's not that at all. It's essentially released where some of them actually are lost into the peritoneal cavity, never to be found again. But let's look at the development of this egg here. We have an undeveloped egg here. We have an oocyte that has started this development. These are granulosa cells. This is a secondary follicle. It looks like a cyclops with a slight grin. Now, and these are different stages, they'd all be in the same place. But over here, we have what we call a Graafian follicle. It's getting awfully close to being ready to ovulate. You would see this as a blister if you were looking at an ultrasound. And here's your egg, and all these, this is zona pellucida cells around here. This is fluid here, and then it ruptures when you get a big surge of luteinizing hormone and estrogen. It ruptures and then it's released. Now, I make a kind of big deal about the cells that are left surrounding the oocyte, the corona radiata, not just because the sperm has to get through it, but there has actually been a vaccine developed for the corona radiata, and it's labeled for feral horses in the United States, all horses in Australia, and elephants, to stop population growth. Now, wild horses, feral horses, you have to shoot them with darts. Now, why it's not labeled for horses that people own is because no one knows just how long that antibody is going to last. So you don't want to say, oh, it lasts a year, and then you have a $10,000 mare and she can't get pregnant. And that's why it's not used in humans either. If we knew you could give a shot or two and cause permanent infertility, a lot of people would probably choose that as a real easy birth control method. Okay, so once it's ruptured and then theoretically goes up into the fallopian tube, the scar remaining is developed into what's called the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum produces the hormones of pregnancy, the estrogen and progesterone, that are needed to keep that first the little zygote, which is first stage, the fertilized egg, and then the early stages of the embryonic development. Keeps them going until the placenta takes over that job of making the hormones. And if you are not pregnant, you're not producing human chorionic gonadotropin. That's the stuff that turns a little stick blue. It will degenerate, and when it degenerates, the whole cycle starts over. Okay, I've already seen that picture. Okay, the ampulla is usual site of fertilization. That's why I had the picture. This part of the uterine tube. And there's ciliated fimbriae that actually have a current that pull the oocyte into the tube, and the isthmus is that small part where I was telling you it can get stuck. Okay, and you also have peristalsis and cilia that move the egg along toward the uterus. There's cells that nourish the oocyte and the sperm. And then, I don't know why this is listed here, but there's a mesosalpinx, which is mesentery, fibrous tissue that holds the uterine tubes in place. And we have this picture again. See, there's the mesosalpinx. It won't be such a long slide either. Such a long show anyway. We keep having the same picture. Okay, the uterus, the major part is the body. The fundus is the top, and the isthmus is the rounded inferior region. The cervix is a narrow neck or outlet that projects into the vagina, and it communicates through, you have an external os for the vagina and the internal os to go into the uterus. And the cervix has glands that secrete a thick mucus, and that mucus prevents sperm from entering except when you're ovulating. And really, if you're pregnant, you don't really want a bunch of anything going up into that pregnancy and messing around with it. Okay, support of the uterus, we've looked at these. The ligaments, the broad ligament, cardinal ligaments hold the cervix, superior part of the vagina. Uterosacral ligaments hold the uterus to the sacrum. Round ligaments bind it to the anterior wall. Now, when you have very, very old women who have their uterus starts to prolapse. It's actually coming out, the vaginal wall is coming out through the vagina, and you got uterus there. It's because all these ligaments have given out. Maybe because they had 15 babies. Okay, and there are little pouches of peritoneum around the uterus. Vesicouterine pouches between the bladder and the uterus. Rectouterine pouches between the rectum and the uterus. Now there's 3 layers to the uterine wall. Perimetrium, which is the serous layer, which is the outer layer. Myometrium, these are the muscles. Endometrium is the mucosal lining. So you've heard of endometriosis. It's the inside lining that goes awry. Okay, now the endometrium consists of layers. The functional layer, stratum functionalis. This is the layer that grows and enlarges and then is shed during periods, menstruation. The basal layer forms a new functionalis after menstruation, and it doesn't change itself. Ovarian hormones don't affect it. Okay, the uterine supply, we have uterine arteries from the internal iliacs and the arcuate arteries and the muscle, myometrium, radial branches, and then we have spiral and straight arteries. Spiral go into the functionalis, straight into the basalis. And I want to show you a picture here. It'll be a lot easier. Sometimes these don't turn as fast. Okay, here we have our radial artery, our little straight arteries. Here are our spiral arteries. And when the body has figured out you're not pregnant, we're going to flush out the inside of the uterus and start over. These will kink in response to hormones, and they kink and they cut off all the blood supply so that this little layer, little thin layer, dies off, and then they unkink and bleed. And that's what makes your period, is the sloughing off of the inside and then the blood. Okay, the vagina is the birth canal and organ of copulation, and it's between the bladder and the rectum. And the urethra is embedded in the anterior wall. I think we have pictures shortly. Layers, adventitia is outer layer, smooth muscle, muscularis, and then stratified squamous mucosa. I've mentioned before, I think this was probably, y'all were in class when we talked about epithelium, how you know what kind of epithelium is where. If a tissue is likely to face friction, it's going to have stratified squamous. And you can imagine that this particular body part does get friction sometimes. Now, there is a, let's go to the next picture. This is showing a really lovely shot. This is called the mons pubis. And this is, the hymen is a little, it's partially ruptured. It's a little membrane that grows over and closes off the vagina. Here is your urethra. This is the labia majora, and these are the labia minora. Some people refer to them as lips. And this is the anus. Okay. And yeah, the mons, we talked about it. The mons and the labia majora have hair on them. The labia minora do not. And the vestibule is the recess between the labia minora, also known as the hole. Okay, the greater vestibular glands are from mucus. The clitoris has erectile tissue, works very much like a penis, and the when stimulated, it becomes enlarged. And the perineal area, or perineum, is a diamond-shaped region between the arch and pubic arch and the coccyx, bordered by the ischial tuberosities. Well, I don't seem to have a picture. Okay. Now we're going to talk about mammary glands, boobs. They're modified sweat glands. Now let me say this. Modified is a key word here. Modified. They are not sweat glands. They make milk. Sweat glands make sweat. Milk glands make milk. Now there is one of my colleagues who, whether she was kidding or not, told some of my students that milk was cow sweat. No, sweat is mostly water and a little bit else. Milk has proteins and it goes good with chocolate. Sweat does not go good with chocolate. Modified sweat glands, 15 to 25 lobes. The areolar is a pigmented area around the nipple. Now, humans have nipples. Cows have teats. Teats are elongated structures. Nipples are small structures, though I have seen a few. Anyway, suspensory ligaments, one hopes last a long time, hold the things up. They say the larger they are, the harder they fall. I better hush. Okay, now then lobules within the lobes have glandular alveoli produce milk. Okay, the milk then goes to the lactiferous ducts, lactiferous sinuses, and then open to the outside of the nipples. Let's look at the picture here. Okay, here we have, let's see, our skin, muscle under it, fat. Most of the mammary tissue is made up of fat. And if you lose a whole bunch of weight, that's going to go too, which is sad. Okay, unless you got too big of ones. This is the areola. This is the nipple. These are the sinuses. And then up in here is your glandular tissue. Now, the milk letdown, I think we may have that later, stimulated by oxytocin. Initially, the baby suckling on the nipple causes oxytocin release, which causes milk letdown. So it goes from these higher regions into here, where the baby can get to it. Eventually, this is a reflex that's learned. You hear the baby crying and the milk will let down. You hear someone's baby in Walmart crying and the milk lets down. Now that's when it gets disturbing. Now, one more thing while I got the the mammary gland picture up. These suspensory ligaments that hold it up, if someone is very small, they're probably going to stay strong and hold that thing up. If they're very large, they're probably going to get stretched. A group of French scientists did a study that had women. One group wore bras, one group didn't wear bras. And they were like 25 years old, 20 to 25, and it showed no difference in boob sag. Now, can you imagine all these male scientists measuring these women's boobs? I'm not sure I'd have volunteered for that. They probably paid them very well. But they said wearing the bra did not help remotely. But it goes on in the article, which was taken down from the site where I had it, which may mean it was a bad article, that it's the opinion of the author that exercise, running, and I will say riding a horse will tug on these suspensory ligaments. So women should at least wear a good sports bra when exercising to keep themselves where they intended to be. Okay, breast cancer usually arises from epithelial cells of the ducts. Risk factors: early onset of menstruation or late menopause, no pregnancies or first pregnancy late in life, family history. 10% are caused by mutation of genes, and you can get tested for these. And if you have these genes, you're probably going to get it. But 70% don't have any risk factor. Their mama didn't have it, nobody had it. Self-examination should be done monthly, and then you should get a mammogram. I think they do it annually starting maybe at 40, maybe they even get a baseline younger than that now. Treatments depend on the lesion. Radiation, chemo, surgery, followed by radiation and chemo. If it's caught very small, just a lumpectomy may be the end of it. But this is a mammogram machine, and what they do is they stick your mammary gland, each one at a time, and they crunch it down. And it's not as horrible as they say, but it's pretty horrible. And then the radiograph they're now digital. So this is normal tissue, and it depends. Some places they're just black and white, but this is a malignancy, and it's actually color-coded by the computer, which makes it easy for the radiologist. Now, you may see perfectly round lymph nodes or something like that. If they let you look at them, don't go having a heart attack if you have those. Okay, now oogenesis, making eggs. This starts in the fetus, actually. Oogonia, the 2N ovarian stem cells multiply by mitosis, store up nutrients, and then the primary oocytes develop into primordial follicles, but they stall out in prophase 1, the first part of meiosis. So you've got all the eggs that are going to form. Females have all the eggs that are going to form by the time they're born. Males continue to make sperm, I always say till 2 weeks after death. Sperm counts do decrease actually in older men, but they still can have viable sperm up until 80s and 90s even, which is horrifying. Okay, now oogenesis, making eggs. Each month after puberty, a few oocytes are going to be activated. Hopefully, one is going to, each month, is going to resume meiosis 1. And you're going to get 2 haploid cells, so it's divided. You remember we have diploid is 2N, full set of chromosomes, and then we have haploid is 1N. And then these are going to divide. You're going to get a secondary oocyte and a first polar body. Polar bodies are duds. We've got pictures we'll show you in a minute. If the sperm penetrates the second oocyte, the one that has been, it will get rid of its extra nucleus, and you get a second polar body. I think a picture will make more sense, which is next. Yes. Okay. So this is before birth. Let's see, this is in the, okay, this side is the male here. This side is the female. We've talked about the male. You get, no, I can't see, these are so small. The male, you start off with 1 diploid stem cell, and you get 2 diploid stem cells, and then you end up with 4 good sperm. Not so in the female. So you go down here, this is all female. They divide, and you get a polar body. This is a dud. It will be thrown away. And then this has still got 2 sets of chromosomes in it. If the sperm penetrates it, it's going to, calcium will be released. All the sperm receptors will be dumped off, and that inner cell will divide again. So by the time the sperm gets to that nucleus, there's only 1 of them. Because if you have 3 nuclei, the whole project is ruined. They die. So now we have, in males, you start with 1 sperm, you get a stem cell, and 4 good sperm. With egg, you start off with a stem cell, and then you end up getting 3 polar bodies, duds, they die, and then 1 viable egg that could become a zygote. Now you see here, this is showing This is the vesicle. This is ovulated already, and it has to have been because the sperm reaches it. Now, if you don't have fertilization, the corpus luteum will degenerate, and then another egg starts developing right up in here. So in review, in the male, you start with one diploid, full set of chromosome, cell, stem cell, and you get 4 haploid sperm cells. And it happens over and over and over and over because you also get a cell left behind. You get a diploid cell plus a diploid cell left for a stem cell. In the female, you start with one diploid cell and you get 1 ovum and 3 polar bodies. Now, the ovarian cycle, this is your monthly cycle, 2 phases in a 28-day cycle. Follicular phase is a growth phase. The follicle's growing, maturing, days 1 to 14. Ovulation occurs around day 14. Don't count on it. I know someone who did, and their child's name is Henry. The rhythm method of birth control is not terribly effective. And then the luteal phase is the second half. This is the corpus luteal activity, and it's preparing you for pregnancy. Okay, establishing the ovarian cycle in childhood. Okay, the ovaries are going to grow, secrete a tiny amount of estrogen, just enough to inhibit the hypothalamus from releasing gonadotropic releasing hormone. But as puberty gets nearer, gonadotropic releasing hormone is going to be released, and that causes follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone to be released by the ovaries. And these continue in a regular cycle. Okay, so during childhood and until puberty, you have a little bit of estrogen that inhibits gonadotropin releasing hormone. That was on the last one. Okay, day 1, gonadotropic releasing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone initiate the growth of several follicles. See, that's why they call it follicle stimulating hormone. The estrogen is going to be released in response more to the luteinizing hormone. Estrogen is, you have more estrogen, it's going to inhibit the release of these hormones. So what birth control pills do is they actually fake pregnancy. You have estrogen and it's going to inhibit the follicle stimulating hormone so you don't develop follicle. Now let's go to the next page here. Okay, estrogen output by the vesicular follicle increases. So we have the follicle, you know, it's big and ready to ovulate. You remember that's the one that looked like the Cyclops with the big giant smile. And there. The high estrogen levels are going to have a feedback, and you're going to get a sudden surge of luteinizing hormone. And when you get the surge of luteinizing hormone, you're going to get another surge of estrogen, and you're going to complete the meiosis. You're going to trigger ovulation. And the reason it's called luteinizing hormone is because the ruptured follicle becomes the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum produces the hormones of pregnancy during its existence. So it produces, the corpus luteum produces inhibin, progesterone, and estrogen so that your body knows it's pregnant so you don't start up another cycle. If the corpus luteum is destroyed, then the pregnancy will be lost in the early stages of pregnancy until the placenta is well established. This is actually used in horses, and I think in humans, actually giving a prostaglandins chemical that will lyse the corpus luteum. It's actually, in the horses, it's called luteolyse, that will reboot the system. Generally, this would be in a non-pregnant horse. You're trying to get them to start their cycling over so that you can get them bred. Okay, If you don't have a pregnancy, and that would be triggered by the actual developing ovum would release gonadotropin releasing hormone, human chorionic gonadotropin. Sorry, I got too many hormones running through my brain. The corpus luteum degenerates. You get an ovarian hormone level drops. You hate everyone. Blockade of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, and the cycle starts over. You have a period. Everyone in the universe becomes evil on these days. And then these days, a little more cheerful around day 14, very friendly. And then either it grows or it doesn't. Either you have a fertilized egg or you don't. Okay, if fertilization occurs, human chorionic gonadotropin will signal pregnancy. If it does not occur, then the corpus luteum degenerates, progesterone falls, spiral arteries kink and spasm, endometrium dies, spiral arteries constrict again, relax, and then you have a rush of blood that helps to remove the functional layer so you can start a nice new clean layer. Effects of estrogen promote oogenesis, developing eggs, and follicle growth, exerts anabolic effect on the female reproductive tract. So women who are postmenopausal may have some lining in the vaginal area, may be thin and easily irritated, and that may need to be supplemented. Support of the rapid but short growth spurt at puberty. So estrogens are going to make you grow, and then you get the decreased, or then it stops growing. And so women start they reach puberty younger. So they have their growth spurt first, and then they stop growing first. This is a girl. We're going for pigtails. I'm not very good at this. Okay, this is going to be a boy. He doesn't start puberty till later, but he grows a lot longer because he did start puberty later. And so he may be much, much taller. So he's all neck. And he's googly-eyed over there. I'm wasting time here. Sorry, guys. Okay, effects of estrogens. Secondary sex characteristics. We talked about these in the male. Growth of the breast. Increased deposit of fat along the hips and breasts, butt. The pelvis will actually widen and lighten to allow you to have an easier way to have a baby. Okay, metabolic effects, helps maintain blood cholesterol level correctly, and calcium uptake. So back to the chapter on bones, when estrogen is gone, women tend to get osteoporosis. Progesterone works with estrogen to establish the uterine cycle, and it also inhibits uterine motility, helps prepare the breast for lactation. Okay, the female sexual response, all in the brain, whatever turns them on, floats their boat. The same thing, you have increased blood supply into clitoris, vaginal mucosa, and even breasts. Secretions, vestibular gland secretions. Orgasm has muscle tension, increased pulse rate, blood pressure, rhythmic contractions of the uterus, because this is under sympathetic response, therefore the increased pulse rate. This is under parasympathetic response, just like men. Females do not have a refractory period after orgasms. Now, female sex drive or libido is thought to be affected by androgens from the adrenal gland, which is why females can continue to have a sex drive even if they lose both ovaries, where males are not going to continue to have a sex drive if they lose both testes without getting supplemental testosterone. Okay, now developmental determination of genetic sex. One of the 23 pairs of chromosomes are your sex chromosomes. There's an X and a Y. Females are XX, and each egg has an X chromosome. Males are XY, so half the sperm have the X, half have the Y. Now, so XX, female, XY, male. Now, on the Y chromosome, you have a gene called the SRY gene that causes the development of the testes and maleness in general. Early on in the 5th week, you have a sexually indifferent stage. Now, one of the psychology teachers was telling one of the psychology teachers was trying to say that everyone was a female to start with, but that's incorrect. Your sex is determined at the moment of conception. If you have a Y chromosome, you'll be male. If you have two X's, you'll be female. But they're identical. This is a gonadal ridge, 5 to 6 week embryo. If they have the SRY, they'll become male. If they don't, they'll become female. Well, they are female. This is a male embryo. You see he still has the testes way up here. Female embryo, this is 8 to 9 week fetus. I think they call 8 weeks the fetal development begins because all the organs are produced. The ovaries are here, and they do come down from where they were. They start up higher up with the kidneys. They do come down into the pelvic area. Now, developmental aspects, the genital tubercle, which we'll see in a minute, becomes the penis in the male, the clitoris in the female. The urethral fold becomes the urethral in the male, labia minora in the female. Labioscrotal folds become the scrotum in the male, labia majora in the female. Okay, this is showing, this is about 5 weeks, and this is a boy. This is before he's developed the scrotum, and really, this is not really much of a penis yet. Okay, the female, you still have the same type folds here, but here you started getting more female development. And inside, you would definitely have the pictures we showed earlier. Okay, descent of the gonads. About 2 months before birth, testosterone stimulates migration of the testes towards the scrotum. Ovaries are also descended, but not all that far. They stop at the pelvic rim. But this is, I did not make this word up, the gubernaculum. It's a fibrous cord from the testes to the scrotum, or from the ovarium to the labium, and it guides the descent. It pulls that testicle down, pulls it actually through the musculature down into the scrotum. At birth, both testes should be down in a human. Now, not all species are that way. Okay, and this is a female. Okay, puberty is in response to rising. We've already talked about puberty. It's the earliest time that reproduction is possible. Menopause, you get declining estrogen levels, so atrophy of reproductive organs and breasts, irritability and depression in some. Some people have absolutely no symptoms at all. Others become monsters. Hot flashes, thinning of the skin, bone loss, cholesterol levels increase, you get falling HDL. Now this is something we already had. That's odd. Okay. This is something I put in that's actually from chapter 28, but I really thought you should see it. Here you see the ovary. This fimbriae picked up this and took it into the fallopian tube, or the tube. And this is the sperm came into it, and we now have a zygote. About 4 days along, you're going to have 4-cell stage. Then a little bit later, you're going to have a blastomere, a morula, a solid ball of blastomeres. So cell here, and then it continues. You get a hollowing out place, blastocyst cavity, and then it goes along here. And then this is a trophoblast. This is the inner cell mass, and it will actually implant itself into here, into the lining of the uterus, which will cause inflammation and bleeding. And rather than die from the inflammation and bleeding, the little zygote develop, it's not quite even to the embryonic stage, actually develops, absorbs nutrition from that. It's not recording. Okay, it's recording again. I actually absorb nutrition from the wall, the little pool of blood. Now we got one more slide, and maybe it won't quit on me again. This is kind of cool. You see, here is your little fetus growing. He's already got the the placenta developed. And the placenta, I don't think everybody has this figured out. It's not a direct connection from the umbilical cord straight into the mother's vessels. You have maternal veins and maternal arteries. The maternal arteries and veins just sit side by side with the embryonic, or actually the fetal arteries and veins. And the fetal arteriole is coming from the heart, so it's an artery, is going to actually dump its waste here and pick up nutrients. And then the fetal vein is it's picked up its oxygen, and it's going to go back into the baby's system. So they're just sitting side by side. Like if you could put your fingers together side by side, you would see how it works. They're just this is fetal circulation, this is maternal. They don't mix. They're just laying side by side, and it's purely diffusion. And the baby is just sucking all the nutrients out of the mom, and the mom's just giving up all the nutrients there. It all works out. Okay, same thing. I hope this whole thing recorded. And just ask me questions if you have them. Thank you.